Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Afghanistan in Review. I'm joined today by Dr. Rustam Ali Seerat. Dr. Seerat has a PhD in international relations from South Asian University in New Delhi, India. He has written extensively on identity politics, international affairs, and human rights with a focus on Afghanistan and South Asia and the Central Asian region. Today we are discussing the recent clashes and talks between the Afghan Taliban and Pakistan, as well as Pakistan's India's new wave of competitions. We will benefit from Dr. Sirat's analysis, who is not only an expert on the regional affairs, but has also lived for many years in India, of course, in Kabul, and he knows very well Pakistan. Mr. Sirat, welcome. It's nice to have you.
Thank you very much.
4 years have passed since the Taliban seized power in Kabul. Except Russia, no country has recognized them, but many are engaging with them at multiple levels. India, China, and Iran, they have close relationships with the Taliban, while Pakistan, which is believed to be the Taliban's traditional supporter or power base, is experiencing a problematic relationship with them. What do you think? What has changed in terms of global and regional politics regarding Afghanistan? Are we seeing new regional realignments, or is it a wait and see policy pursued by many regional countries? How can we explain the current situation that the Taliban are not recognized, but they are still in power and many countries are engaging with them?
Thank you very much for inviting me here. The attacks on Pakistan were taking place even before 2021. So you remember that attack on the military school. It was, I think, in West Pakistan and Peshawar or somewhere, which I cannot remember exactly. It was more severe than other attacks. There were many children, they were killed at that time. But the Pakistani response was not that extreme that now they are responding to this level. So what happened is that Afghanistan collapsed and the Taliban came to power. Actually, Afghanistan lost that international support that it had. So the Americans who are in Afghanistan and their presence would deter Pakistan to get this much bold. It was this year that the Pakistanis actually for the first time attacked even inside Kabul. There was this from the air, their plane went and they attacked. So that shows that Pakistanis are, since the Taliban are in power, they are much weaker than the Pakistanis. They do not have international support as like the previous government had. So for that, the Pakistanis are feeling a little bold, or even way bolder than earlier, and that's why they are getting more assertive in their response to attacks by groups like TTP on Pakistani territories. So that's one big change. Another is that for me, it seems a little like since Pakistani army is a huge military industry, it receives lots of finance from Pakistani government or their budgets. It's huge business, military business as well there. So for that, you have to continue creating fights to expand the army or to keep the army afloat, and also to justify the amount of budget that they are investing and the military expansion of the Pakistani army. So for that, they will need something like TTP or even the Taliban in Afghanistan to expand that military industry complex which have been built there. And on Afghanistan side also, the Taliban are also spending a huge amount of money on the army, on their many forms of paramilitias which they are creating right now. So it is also for the Taliban a convenient move to create some kind of problems for the Pakistanis, or by sheer not committing to the Pakistanis that, will control the TTP in Afghanistan or we will kick them out of Afghanistan. The Taliban are not making that commitment to the Pakistani army. So it actually helps the Taliban to keep that fighting, that the structure which they had in the last 30 years, which they have built, is a military organization. So it's also serve the Taliban to keep that fighting spirit and, keep going on. So if there is not something tension on the border or otherwise, let's say both sides will have hard time justifying their military expenditures and expansion. So that's, I think it speaks a lot when it comes to what is going on there. But at the same time, they are cautious to keep it at certain level. So they will not escalate it out of hand. So they will keep it in a certain level. This, my assumption is that will go on because it will actually help. It actually helps both sides here. And of course, for the Pakistani army, it's a good exercise to keep testing your military, your army, your capabilities in any future confrontation with India. So it is a very good testing site. Another distinct characteristics of Pakistanis attacks on the border site in Afghanistan, even I think it was last year, that the Pakistani army would attack with plane certain port which actually very close to Afghanistan-Pakistan border in a time that they could easily send their army there to capture whatever head of the TTP which were there. So, but they are, attacking with the plane and killing many civilians as well. And that says a lot about the time that we are living in international conflicts, obviously in Ukraine and also in Israel-Palestine conflict. We see that there is huge reliance on air capabilities, on fighting from a distance, on using technology instead of sending soldiers to the area. This is also, I think, Pakistani military, it's a good ground for them to adapt to the new technology, to the new warfare, to the new way of fighting. So that's also another point which I think it's very important to notice.
So you're basically arguing that these conflicts are sort of staged, as many commentators, they believe that these are fake conflicts and negotiations, and they are trying to justify, as you said, their military expenditures. But we also see that, for example, a few days ago, there was an explosion in Pakistan. There was another one in India. And on a pragmatic level, we also see that the Taliban, they are getting close to India. For example, their foreign ministers, he visited India and he was welcomed there. He had press conferences there. And the Indian government, they announced that they will increase their diplomatic presence in Kabul to an embassy level. And it shows that they are really getting close while they are distancing themselves from Pakistan. So what role does the Indian-Pakistan competitions play in these conflicts and the relationship between the Afghan Taliban and Pakistan?
So I didn't say it was a staged operation. I would say, well, it is a convenient way of keeping yourself afloat. So for it serves both Pakistani army and also the Taliban. So I wouldn't say it is a stage, but whatever is going on, so it helps both sides in that terms. Otherwise, if you say on the issue of border, Pakistan, it had lots of leverage to earlier to use, let's say, well, to tell to the Taliban that, we'll help you take over of Afghanistan even before 2021. Say, well, if you have a sign, say that, the border is official, we do not have any territorial claim over Pakistan and all, which we see that the Pakistanis haven't done that. Given that the Taliban did not have power before, at least power in Kabul before 2021, there was a chance that they might make some kind of deal, which that was a chance. So we say that's why I'm saying that, there is this continuation of the situation like this help both sides. On the question of recent development in India and in Pakistan. So there is a huge temptation for one to make a very good link there. We see that there is on Monday there is attack in Delhi close to Red Fort, and then the next day there is an attack on Islamabad. So you could say, well, there is some kind of revenge is going on, that this side is attacking their capital, and then they are saying, well, we have also access to your capital. But so far, although the Pakistanis have said that there has been an Indian interference here when it comes to attacking Pakistan's capital, Islamabad, but the Indians have not said that. They have not directly blamed the Pakistani government. Usually they do that, after every attacks which happens in India, so they would say, they would find a direct way to Pakistan. But now the curious thing is that, in the Prime Minister Modi's statement, he has mentioned that, it was the work of anti-national forces. Anti-national, the term in India is quite broadly defined, so which usually it has been used against, let's say, those who have protested in New Delhi, for example, against the citizenship law in India, or it have even been used against the students of GNU or Nehru University in New Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. So the term have been used against them, but now he is using the term here, but also they are making a connection that, we see it as a terroristic attack, and they are finding the links with those attacks in Kashmir and Kannauj. So that development is there that might compel us or tell us to say, well, maybe there is a link between them. But okay, it's on that front which I cannot say, well, that this side or that side had a hand in these attacks on both sides of border, so I cannot. But certainly, if we say that there is a link between them, if we suppose that there is a link between the attacks in Islamabad and also the attack in New Delhi, so it shows that India and Pakistan are engaging now on different level. Earlier, they would use planes to attack each other, but now the retaliation is in another way. So, which I cannot confirm that that's what's happening, but maybe it's tempting to think like that. But on the another question of whether the Taliban's are realigning themselves more close to New Delhi, there's no doubt that as the Taliban remains in power, they will metamorphose into some kind of nationalistic group. They will slowly and gradually they will become more nationalistic. So to remain in power, they will abandon most of their ideological elements that they have done now. So they might sever some of their links with these other groups like Al Qaeda or maybe Islamic State or some others. Of course, they will, sever some of or limit their relationship with them and becoming more nationalistic in when they are remaining in Kabul. So that could happen, and it could play that in the hands of India, which India might engage more with them, and that is there. Another possibility is that the Taliban's, there is a risk, or it's actually happening, that they are infiltrated, or I would say hijacked, by the nationalistic elements from Pashtun ethnicity in Afghanistan. We see that in post 2021, soon when the Taliban came to power, there was a rush from those nationalist elements of even previous government or those who were outside Afghanistan. They went to Afghanistan and they tried to redirect the Taliban and reshape them into a nationalist group. And that's also a parallel development which is happening in Afghanistan. So from the way they have dealt with the language of Persian language or Uzbeki language recently. So that development also is there.
Yeah, so when the Taliban they took over Kabul, only days after the fall of Kabul, Pakistan's army chief he visited Kabul and reportedly helped the Taliban to form their interim cabinet. As you remember, General Faiz Hamid's photo holding a cup of tea went viral on social media and across news outlets. The event also reaffirmed the relationship between the Taliban and the Pakistan, that Pakistan helped them to return to power. But after 4 years, now we see that the relationship between the two has reached to a level that, as you said, Pakistan even bombed Kabul, which is something that no one believed that would happen. And in the last few weeks, they have been engaged in clashes across border, and also they had talks in Turkey and Qatar, but couldn't reach an agreement. Now, many Pakistani officials and politicians say that the cup of tea, which symbolized the friendly relationship between the Taliban and Pakistan at the beginning, is now symbolizing a hostile one. And as you said, the Taliban, they are trying to become nationalist, independent, and stay on power. It is also difficult that Pakistan, especially its military establishment, led them to become independent, right? Because they have been with them, and the Taliban have been their proxy. Now the question is that why we see this turn in relationship between Pakistan and Taliban, and what leverages does Pakistan has against the Taliban, and what leverages do the Taliban have in order to, and for the Pakistan in order to keep them at bay, and for the Taliban in order to become independent, as you said, and to stay in power for longer.
So for the Pakistanis, they have lots of strings to pull. They have the Pakistani government have different level of connections with different Taliban leaders, groups, and they have lots of loyalists among the Taliban. So if the Taliban if Pakistanis in the long run want to create serious problem for the Taliban, it would be to actually divide them, supporting one of their groups. There are some kind of rivalry among Haqqani network and others in Afghanistan. So among the Taliban, Pakistanis could exploit that divide. But that's not happening, or they are not pulling those resources, which makes me think my previous analysis that it is some kind of convenient for both sides to keep their military training, using their equipments as so to expand the army, to keep the army afloat and all, which I think it helps, it supports my previous argument. Also, Pakistanis have another option which actually support those who are now fighting the Taliban, those who are against the Taliban. If Pakistanis they could actually use them against the Taliban. And as you know, that throughout Afghanistan history, Pakistan had this advantage of hosting these groups in their territories and then helping them infiltrate Afghanistan or make problems for the governor, for those who are governing Kabul. So Pakistanis have that option and they are not using that. So this hypothesis actually, I think, support my previous argument. So that is on that front. But overall, I want to return actually to your earlier point, which I think I forgot about, the larger rivalry in the area between India, Pakistan, China, US, and all. As we see that in this what we could call it a multipolar moment, or that we are moving towards a multipolar moment from a unipolar moment when the US was the sole dominant power from 1992, when the Soviet Union disintegrated to, let's say, to 16, or let's say now. As we are moving towards this, some areas of influence are coming up, like Chinese will have their area of influence, or an area that they could dominate would be East China, East Asia, and also Americans would have, say, let's say the US, the North America and South America and Central America, and then we have the Europeans. They would say, well, we are making a kind of, keeping our partnership with the US, but EU will remain a unified power. So we could say for India, for example, India could see that, it is area or the region that it want to remain a dominant power or would like to dominate would be South Asia. So for that, in India, actually, in the Indian maps, Afghanistan is a neighbor to India. We could see that in their maps and all. So they would say, well, we have direct, Afghanistan is part of their neighborhood. And Pakistan is way smaller than now, it is. So based on that map, that shows India's ambition for, or you could say design for the region. India is bringing Afghanistan as a part of South Asia, constantly defining Afghanistan as part of South Asia. Also, Iran is, for example, is not there. Actually, earlier I was looking that, how far, for example, Iran is from Indian border, and also how far is Afghanistan from Indian border. And on the Balochistan in Iran, southeastern Iran, you see that it's actually, Iran is quite close to Indian border. But we see that in the Indian discourse, that is, Iran is not part of South Asia. So that actually shows that maybe Iran is too a big country for India to, let's say, bring that in the umbrella of South Asia and all. But Afghanistan is an easy task because of its small geography and small population, and and all. So that's actually, I think maybe India is growing as a great power, or maybe regional power. It is actually growing economically very fast. So it will have ambition in the region, and of course it will make Pakistanis way anxious than they are now.
And this would bring the Indian and Pakistani's competitions inside Afghanistan. So what impacts it will have on Afghanistan? Because Afghanistan for a long time has been locked in these geopolitical competitions and regional competitions. And of course, during the Republican government also, these regional competitions were ongoing, although lesser extent because of the presence of the United States and NATO countries. So how do you see the future of these competitions and their impacts on Afghanistan?
So this understanding in New Delhi is that, of course, the Taliban are undemocratic. They have created this gender apartheid in Afghanistan. They have violated lots of human rights laws and international agreements and all. But they say, well, now they are in power, we have to deal with them. We have to work with them. So that's the understanding in New Delhi. But India has, and of course it makes sense from what I said, that, if India wants to dominate South Asia, and Afghanistan is as part of South Asia, they are defining it. So it makes sense a lot for India to pull Afghanistan towards it, pull the Taliban towards itself. But that brings the rivalry between the two inside Afghanistan. Pakistan have lots of strings to pull, and also India can make lots of trouble for the Pakistanis, and that would be basically dividing the Taliban also. So it might happen some kind that, there will be a division among the Taliban. Those who are close to Pakistan, they will be pulled that side, and then some of them will be pulled on the another side. That would be mostly nationalist side. So that's also a possibility. But I think India it's a very big dilemma in India as well, that, if you are making close ties with the Taliban, so you cannot keep the relationship only with the Taliban and keep the relation limited. So you have to engage more and wide with them. And that would actually open the Indian Muslims to the Taliban presence. And it is actually quite felt when Mutaqi went to New Delhi. He also went to Deoband and met with these religious leaders there, and he was welcomed quite well. That actually opens India's vulnerability as well, that you are creating, this connection between the Taliban and Deoband and those all Muslim groups which are in India. So, and it actually opens also infiltration from the Pakistani side also. So that's going to be a very big problem for the Indians. But as well, another problem with the Indian, of course, that they would say, well, the Taliban are in power, we have to deal with them. But India is a big country with lots of democratic parties, and women advocacies and women organizations are quite powerful there. The Indian government will have to also answer to those forces. What happened in at the Afghanistan embassy in New Delhi when the women reporters were excluded by the Taliban from the conference, there was a huge backlash from the Indian society, women rights activists and all. They said this, you cannot actually discriminate on the Indian soil against women. And the next day the Taliban were forced to let's say allow the female journalists to the embassy and then talk to them. So that's also in India, it will create a lot of problem for the Indians when they would like to engage with the Taliban. And Pakistanis, I think, do not have that problem as far as we know.
Mm. As you know, the Taliban, they are not recognized by the people of Afghanistan. At least they have not taken the power through elections or any other participatory mechanism. So they have taken power through violence. And at the same time, they are not recognized internationally. How these internal and external illegitimacy affects Taliban's role in the regional games, also their relations with the countries beyond the region. And as we have seen that in the last 4 years, the Taliban, they have clashed many times with the Iranian and Pakistani forces across Afghanistan, Iran, and Afghanistan-Pakistan borders. Such clashes were rare during the 20 years of the Republican government, and perhaps it does not occur elsewhere in the world within such an interval. So now the question is that how the Taliban, they as a group that has no internal and external legitimacy, they survive and they try to survive within these regional competitions that you described. And it might be also because of their illegitimacy that they are engaging in cross-border fires.
Of course, that's there that and the Taliban could actually use the anti-Pakistani sentiments which is in Afghanistan to galvanize people for its support or some kind of trying to legitimize themselves. And of course, their illegitimacy in Afghanistan opens them to exploitation by Pakistan or other countries for that matter. I was checking earlier the statement by Pakistan's Minister of Defense. He is calling Taliban regime in Kabul, so not regime, not Afghanistan government or anything for that. So thus they are using this at least at the rhetoric level. But my understanding is that beyond that, their illegitimacy at the international level cannot affect the Taliban much more than it has done already. So instead, the Taliban will have, other countries will, normalize the relationship with the Taliban even more. So I don't think the Taliban are vulnerable from that side to that extent. But on the question of Taliban's coming to power, having a lot of self-confidence, saying that we defeated the US and all. So they attacked you. They had some cross-border clash with Iran, and then now they have with Pakistan. So slowly they will understand the limit of their power. So usually when groups like the Taliban came to power, they think their power is unlimited. But gradually they will understand that their power is limited. It has happened with the revolution which took place in China. It has happened with the Iranian revolution. The revolutionaries or those who are taking power, they are quite confident first, but then they will slowly understand the limit of their power. So the Taliban have realized now they are quite conciliatory towards Iran. They understand that they cannot keep hostilities on both front, on let's say west of Afghanistan, east and south. The only relation they will have, good relation they would have, would be with Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan. So then the Taliban understand that, Afghanistan economy is actually connected to these two countries, Iran and Pakistan, more than it's connected to Central Asia or any other place. So for that, the Taliban cannot keep hostility towards both of these neighbors. They will have to choose. I was reading that one of their minister, or I think the deputy minister, he has said that we should ban Pakistanis import from Afghanistan. We should not import. That's almost impossible. It's no way to replace that. The only way to replace that would be from imports from Iran, or maybe Chinese or Indian imports that goes through Iran into Afghanistan. So that would be the only way. But they have lots of problems there also. American sanctions are there on Iran, and even the capacity of Iranian infrastructures, and also I don't know how profitable it is for the businessmen and all to bring these imports from the western part of Afghanistan, which is quite way farther than now that it comes from Pakistan. Gradually, in this regard, the Taliban will understand their limits, so the limits of their power.
Yeah. As a final question, Dr. Seerat, how do you see the future of the conflict between the Afghan Taliban and Pakistan, considering the issue of TTP, and also how you see the future of the Taliban and the impacts of this overall situation on the future of the people of Afghanistan?
Okay, so if we say the tension between Pakistan and the Taliban will continue, my understanding it, but it will remain to a certain level because of the logic that I explained at the beginning of our talk. Because so that's my understanding, that it will remain a very this limited level. But when it comes towards evolution of, if we call the evolution of Taliban in Afghanistan from being anti-government or guerrilla forces, now they are the governing force. So their revolution, I still cannot get my head around, because surprisingly the Taliban are the most uneducated group that has taken power. I don't know how long we have here, whether I could explain it or not.
Yeah, please.
But what we could see is one way, because they do not have good text to read them and say, well, in this way they might evolve in this certain way, from their text. But from their structure and similarities with other countries, specifically with the Iranian Wilayat Faqih, which I think it might give us some hint in how the Taliban might develop. So in Iran, we see that there are similarities between the two, of course, like, a single leader. In Afghanistan, we call it Amir al-Mu'mineen. There they call it Rahbar, or supreme leader. And then there is uh, ideological rigidity, distance toward women, towards other sexual identities, and also other ethnic or even religious groups. There are similarities between the two. If we see that, Iranian government is now becoming more nationalistic in nature also. I think the last the last 2 years development in the Middle East, it showed that Iranians nationalist forces are taking over from the religious ones. That's why they will say, well, let's leave Palestine for the Palestinians, and we will not intervene or support them. We will only attack Israel if we are attacked. So they are not proactively engaging anymore. Of course, although Khamenei is there, but he does not have that power that he used to have. The leadership is getting old, and also they have almost that their anti-women policies have been hollowed out. Now we see that on the streets of Tehran and all, women are quite free. Of course, occasionally they will pick one woman and maybe misbehave with them, but overall the society has almost hollowed out the religious policies of the Iranian government. But I think a similar trend might happen in Afghanistan also, as the Taliban will get more nationalistic. There is a possibility that people will find creative ways of defining their policies, hollowing out them from the content. Maybe they keep the form as the Iranians have kept it, but hollow the content slowly and all. And I think that's going to happen in Afghanistan. Of course, there are differences. For one, that the Taliban are quite new now, and they say, well, they are still hopeful that we will create this utopia of Muslim utopia, and slowly they will find out that it is not impossible. There would be disappointment among themselves, as it happened in Iran, and also so that possibility is that as we move on, the Taliban will they might go some kind of internal evolution, or I would not call it revolution, but they will evolve in some ways. So your question on what is the consequences
How
for.
this situation will impact the future of Afghanistan, the situation of the absence of Afghanistan from regional and international platforms or movements, and then the impacts on the future of the country and the people.
Of course, it has a huge impact. It will have huge impact on people in Afghanistan. But we should be sure when we're saying people, who we mean, because Afghanistan is an ethnically divided society, ethnically diverse society, religiously almost also diverse society. Of course, the Taliban policies will impact differently different sects or ethnic groups in Afghanistan. As nowadays I can see that there is a hope among Pashtun diaspora. Lots of them are returning to Afghanistan. They are making investments because they find that environment quite good for themselves. But for many others, specifically the Hazaras, there is a huge disappointment. They don't know a lot, they're not investment, even though there are lots of problems for the Taliban. As we see, the constructions are banned in Kabul, specifically in the areas which are the Hazaras are there. There are land grabbing from the Hazaras. Lands are taken. Coaches are almost have the free hands to go and claim wherever land they want across Hazarajat and all. And the same could be about Tajiks, that they are also vulnerable. And of course, when we talk about the Tajiks, which section of the Tajiks we are talking, also Badakhshani Tajiks, they are allowed more among the Taliban, so they will be safe. The Taliban are more tolerant of them. There was some protest against them, and the Taliban did not kill, let's say, suppressed that way, but they made some kind of accommodation of their demands there. But the Taliban are quite unhappy with the Panjshiri Tajiks. So there are these differences. So when we are talking about the future of the people of Afghanistan, they are the very diverse population, and Taliban policies will have different impacts on different ethnic groups and all in Afghanistan. I'm sure those who are close to the Taliban government, those who are seen by the Taliban government as their people, let's call them, so they will benefit a lot. But those who have been branded as, that they are not part of the country or part of the nation, or they were cooperating with the Americans or others, of course, they will have very, very bad time than those who are actually close to the Taliban. So I would not be able to give generalized response to the impacts of Taliban policies on people in Afghanistan, but I would say because it will not be a good response. It will have different impacts on different population in Afghanistan.
Overall, the trend is negative, right?
Well, overall, I mean, Afghanistan is part of the world, and the trend around the world is negative. I mean, when it comes about the backslide of the democratic politics, Afghanistan will be, of course, impacted by that. Let's say in India, earlier we talked about India. If there are forces in India that actually undermines democratic politics in India, so that would have, you could say, well, it will make for Indian government, it will make easy to deal with the Taliban. So that's why, my thing is that authoritarians will, be more friend with each other than, let's say, an authoritarian or ideology government with a democratic government. So in that case, of course, what they call it democratic backsliding will have an impact on Afghanistan. On the question of inflation, of course, we know that Afghanistan have been impacted. Ukraine war has impacted Afghanistan hugely. And also we know now with the introduction of AI, and we don't know where it's going on, but Afghanistan also will be impacted, of course.
Dr. Seerat, thank you for your time and for your insightful analysis.
Thank you very much for inviting me.